You are listening to That Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding. Between 2 and 6% of people have hoarding disorder, yet very few of us talk about it. Learn about the condition from me, somebody who has it, as well as academics, therapists and other experts I interview. Find out how to support the podcast at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support. Finally, I am not a doctor, I'm just a hoarder doing her best. So do seek professional support if and when you need it. Hey, how are you? I have been full of germs, but I am starting to feel better. Today, I am talking about acting as if, which is all about taking action, whether you feel it or not, whether you believe in it or not. Basically, acting as if is about doing a behaviour before your belief in it or faith in it catches up. This is something I've used a few times in my life. I used it as a child to deal with painful shyness. And I've used it in the last month to deal with hating autumn. It's an incredible thing, really. When I was a child, I was overwhelmingly shy and I couldn't... Well, once I knew people, I was fine. I was the chatty person, you know. But if I was in an unknown situation or with new people or feeling a bit scared or intimidated, I was so painfully shy. I'll let you into a secret. I still am in situations where I don't know anybody or feel intimidated, but I'm marginally better at hiding it these days. But as a child, it was a lot more limiting. And what I started doing, I didn't know this was like a known technique. I don't know if it was a known technique at the time, but I used to picture this girl from school who I imagined to have so much confidence. Looking back, she probably didn't, but that's how she came across, full of confidence. And I started when I was in a situation where I was just frozen and couldn't speak or couldn't do something. I would ask myself, what would she do? And I would kind of embody her and act as if I was her. And for me, the way I saw her, that involved not caring if I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing. I would just do it anyway. And so in situations where I was paralysed with shyness, I learnt that if I embodied this girl from school, I could do the thing that I was otherwise rooted to the spot and unable to do. And so I started using that. And every time I was rooted to the spot and unable to speak, I would embody this girl from school and do the thing I needed to do. And it was pretty effective. But the most interesting thing is that I realised a couple of years later that I wasn't having to go through the process of, okay, what would she do? I will step into that mindset and do it. And instead I was a lot more fluidly, a lot more automatically just doing that anyway. I didn't have to go through the process of embodying this girl who knew nothing about any of this. I was just doing the thing I'd been acting as if I could do all along. And in a similar way, I've been trying for a few years to hate autumn less, because I appreciate that there is a lot of beauty in this time of year. But for me, that beauty is always less important than the fact that I just get an overwhelming feeling of doom that it's almost winter. And I've never been able to appreciate autumn for being autumn. Instead, I see the signs of autumn and I think, oh no, it's nearly winter. And I've been trying to change this for a few years, but I've never really been able to. It hasn't reached my bones. But this year, I've been being more intentional about it, and I got really specific. And what I decided to do, rather than every time I saw a sign of autumn and felt the dread, rather than just saying to myself, don't feel the dread, appreciate the beauty, which never really did the thing. Instead, I got specific and I started looking in real detail at the leaves. Not the big collection of leaves on a tree so much as picking up specific leaves off the floor, looking at the colours, looking at the veins, looking at the shape of the leaf, learning some of the leaves of some of the trees. I'm not very good at that, but I'm trying. And at the start of autumn, I was very much acting as if I was interested in the leaves. I was going through the motions of being interested in the leaves, but I was doing it. And I would compare, oh, the veins are really different on this leaf compared to that leaf. Look at how much redder the leaves on that side of the tree are than the leaves on the other side of the tree. And I wonder why that is. And what's happened is that by acting as if autumn leaves were interesting, what's actually happened is autumn leaves have become interesting. And now when I am resentfully doing a mental health walk and it's pouring with rain and winter is coming, I'm looking at the leaves with genuine interest and enthusiasm. And that only happened because I started off acting as if the leaves were interesting and worth being enthusiastic about. So there's something about acting, doing before we feel ready or before our brains have quite come round to an idea. We often wait until we feel ready or wait until something feels right. But that might take a really long time. And there's this big gap often between when we are emotionally ready for something compared to when we are intellectually or cognitively understanding the process. This idea of acting as if is based on the theory that action creates motivation. It's not that we need to wait till we feel motivated to act. Instead, by acting, we get the cogs turning and we can then become motivated. None of this is a kind of, you know me well enough to know this isn't a toxic positivity, paint a smile on and do it anyway. It's about getting the cogs moving and doing the action and waiting for our minds or our souls to catch up. Our brains change when we repeatedly do an action. And hoarding behaviours are so based on repeated cycles. And the behaviours we do reinforce the beliefs that make our hoarding worse. And the beliefs that make our hoarding worse affect the behaviours we do. And so breaking that cycle is really important. And so doing differently, our beliefs and feelings can catch up later. One of the real benefits of acting as if is that it creates new evidence for our brains that we can do things differently. It creates new evidence that we are capable of things we didn't think we were capable of. And all of that data can then lead us to, over time, kind of grease the wheels a bit and make it a bit easier to take more positive action and to feel less conflicted or less torn or less pained about it. So how do we do it? How do we act as if? One ties in a bit with the girl from school I used to imagine when I was paralysed with shyness. And it's imagining another person and asking yourself what they would do. The wording I often use with myself is not ideal, to be honest, but it's the one that always pops into my head. But what I ask myself quite regularly is, what would a normal person do? But really the question is, what would a person without hoarding disorder do? What would a person without this problem do? Would she take out the rubbish? If so, I'll take out the rubbish. Would a person without this problem keep this item? If they wouldn't, what would they do with it? And acting accordingly, whether I feel it or not. Another way is to act as if the item is already gone. I have a thing that once I've tied the handles of a rubbish bag, it's kind of gone in my head, even if it's still in the house. It's very, very rare for me to reopen a rubbish bag and go back through it once the handles are tied. There's like a psychological closure, whether it's physically out of the house or not. And we can try and do that with things like donation bags, donation boxes. If something's in the boot of the car ready to go to the charity shop, then it's no longer ours. It can create a psychological shift that can actually be a huge relief. I can stop worrying about those things now and move on to the next decision I have to make. It's a way to basically chivvy ourselves on when we feel stuck. Another way that we can access this acting as if is to act as if we trust the process. I talked about this on an episode a couple of months ago about self-compassion, and how I had attended a conference about shame, and one of the core messages that came through numerous talks over that 2-day conference was that self-compassion is the antidote to shame. And I have always got stuck on that, because I get stuck on whether I deserve that self-compassion or not, whether I merit it, whether I've earned it. But what shifted for me during that conference, and that I've been trying to put into action since, is this sense that whether I deserve it or not, self-compassion is the antidote to shame. And I am frozen by shame an embarrassing amount of the time. So what I've been doing when I feel frozen by shame is reminding myself self-compassion is the antidote to shame. And as soon as I start going, yeah, but you don't deserve self-compassion, I say, that doesn't matter. The fact is that self-compassion is the antidote to shame. That's what I need to do. Whether I deserve it or not, that is what I need to be doing. Put the deserving bit aside. That doesn't matter. I'm doing it anyway. And it's a strange thing, kind of giving over my power like that, my overriding my instincts. But my instincts are often really cruel to myself and really self-destructive. So maybe some instincts should be overridden. But acting as if we trust the process can look like following expert advice from somebody we trust, like a therapist, even if we don't feel like we deserve it or we're not entirely sure it will work. It can look like trying to follow a particular system or a particular process, whether we're 100% confident in it or not. Just acting as if this is the thing we need to do and doing it, testing it out, experimenting. Another way to incorporate acting as if into what we do and doing things differently is acting as if we deserve our homes to be nicer than they are. Asking, what would somebody who values themselves and their space do? What would that person do? I'll do that. Because I'd quite like to be a person who valued myself. And so maybe I need to do the actions that a person who values themselves does to try and start those cogs turning in the right direction. You might want to act as if letting go of items isn't as painful and tormenting as it might feel. Going through the motions of sorting and discarding, committing to maybe doing it for a particular amount of time or getting a certain number of bags out of the house. You might want to act as if you have faith that you can tolerate discomfort, because you can, but you might not believe you can. The fear of that sense of discomfort can be so overwhelming when actually we tolerate discomfort all the time. Living in a hoarded home is an exercise in discomfort. So what if you acted as if you knew you could tolerate the discomfort of discarding things or the discomfort of not acquiring something? This podcast is sponsored by Chirp Your Home, a decluttering and organising course for overwhelmed people. Amy, a declutter coach and professional organiser, has condensed down a range of tools and techniques which she's developed with clients over the past 5 years. Chirp Your Home is a course that uses a mixture of reflective exercises and practical tools with lots of options and opportunities to adapt methods to work for you as an individual. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. The course is in audio format with accompanying worksheets, and it's split across 4 modules. If you're worried about finding the time to work through the course, Amy also runs a free body doubling group twice a week that you can use to work through the course in your own time. Visit chirpyourhome.podia.com, that's chirpyourhome.podia.com, and use voucher code OCHPOD for 15% off. So that's some ideas of how acting as if can look in your day-to-day actions. So let's have a think about what might get in the way. Some of the common obstacles that might need a bit of navigation. Now, one is, I feel like a fraud. I feel like I'm not being authentic. I feel like I don't want to do this. You might be discarding things or sorting things, but thinking, this is pointless. I can't keep this up. It's only going to get full again. And that disconnect between what you're doing and how you're feeling can make you feel like you're not being true to yourself, like you're lying to yourself. But the thing is, what we're doing is we're doing something new. And new things don't tend to feel completely natural and authentic. Because if they felt natural and authentic, that would be what we were doing already. That would be our process. It would be the pattern we're already in. So when we recognize that feeling in ourselves of feeling like a fraud, something I find useful is to take that actually as a positive reminder of, hey, you're doing something different. That's why it feels unnatural. You should feel proud of yourself for trying to do something differently. You're learning, you're testing, you're trying. You're not being dishonest. You're trying something new and it doesn't feel quite right, but new things often don't. I have a shoulder problem that comes and goes, and I have been having physiotherapy for it again recently. And when the physio gives me exercises, they often hurt. And it can feel like, is this really helping the pain? Or am I just making my pain worse? Because in the moment, I'm making my pain worse. And it feels really unnatural to make myself do a thing to my already sore shoulder that will make it more sore. That doesn't feel like the natural thing. The natural thing feels like to never use my arm again. But I'm overriding that because the physio knows a lot more than I do about shoulder muscles and joints. And not using my shoulder hasn't fixed it. So I'm trusting the process. I'm doing the thing that hurts more in the hope that it makes improvements in the long run. I'm making unnatural movements to do these exercises that feel just wrong. They're not things we normally do with our arms. But I'm trusting the process and I'm doing them in order to heal. So it feels like a fake movement that's making things worse. But people who know a lot more than I do all recommend it. And so I'm doing it. I'd got myself into a pattern of avoiding using that arm when I could because it hurt. Now I'm doing things differently even though it doesn't feel quite right, because that's the right thing to do. That's the evidence-based thing to do. That's what the experts say to do. And in the same way, we might have avoided making a lot of decisions about our possessions because it hurts. And then if we do try to make a decision or take action, it feels unnatural and it feels painful. And we wonder whether we're actually making things worse for ourselves. And it's so tempting at that point to say, well, this is so distressing, it's actually better for me not to do it. But just like doing an exercise that hurts and feels wrong for my shoulder is something I'm doing to improve what's going on with my joint, we can do things differently in our homes in the hope that our minds and our behaviours catch up and do start to feel more natural. Feeling like a fraud or feeling unnatural is a recognition of change, of positive change. It doesn't have to be a sign telling us to stop. It can be a sign that things are shifting. Another obstacle with acting as if is that it can intensify difficult feelings, difficult emotions, difficult memories. We have got into this situation through years, decades of a particular behaviour for probably a complex range of reasons. And sometimes when we act as if we are a person who doesn't hoard, that can lead to a strong emotional response. That might be panic, it might be grief, it might be anger or fear. And that can feel like proof we shouldn't have done it, we shouldn't be doing it. And this is a really tricky one, and it can be a sign that we are pushing ourselves too hard. It can also be a sign that we need some external support, or it can be an indication of, oh, that really touched a particular nerve, that we need to ask ourselves a bit more about what exactly happened here. I gave away 3 bags of clothes last week and that felt fine. What is it about giving away that pair of shoes that feels so much more painful? It can be somewhere we can learn from. We can also try and remind ourselves that feeling something intensely isn't the same thing as it having been a bad decision. It isn't the same thing as it being dangerous or threatening. And that if we've experienced loss or deprivation or grief before, and we feel that again through discarding something, we can remind ourselves it's not the same thing. It can feel very much like it. And our nervous system is doing a protective thing, but maybe on overdrive. And it can be a sign that our emotions are working with kind of out-of-date information. I can find it quite useful to say, okay, I know why you're panicking, but you're panicking based on something that happened when I was 12 or 22 or 32, not based on what's happening now, what my situation is now. De-Hoarding Darlings are a special group of listeners who go the extra mile to support the podcast. They get an extra written post every month with links, answers to extra questions from guests, recommendations, and a de-hoarding playlist. You can become a De-Hoarding Darling and help to support the future of the podcast, as well as getting this monthly blog post at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/darling. It can be good to expect that there might be big feelings showing up. There might not be. It might all go surprisingly smoothly. But it can be good to be aware that it might, because it's already less alarming and less derailing if we're kind of expecting them. It can be good to have a plan for what to do if we feel an overwhelming wave of emotion. It can be good to make sure we have some external support set up for those moments. Someone we can check in with at the end of the week or at the end of the day. It can be good to set parameters like setting a timer or just reminding yourself of what your usual coping mechanisms are. Ideally not the negative ones, not the ones that involve going on Etsy and ordering £200 worth of crochet blankets. But for you, there might be grounding exercises, or there might be a YouTube video you enjoy watching or a book you enjoy reading. It can be good to prepare and to remind ourselves that intense feeling isn't necessarily the same as an objective emergency. Sometimes we are in danger, but that danger is not often caused by donating a pair of shoes to the charity shop or throwing some packaging in the bin. So identifying to the best of our ability what is that feels crappy and what is this is objectively dangerous can be a useful tool. But if things feel too overwhelming, do stop. You're allowed to stop. This is an experiment. It's something you're testing. You're learning about yourself as you do it. And that links to the next potential challenge, which is working out what is uncomfortable but worth pushing through and what is harmful pushing through that is actually detrimental. And this is so hard. This is hard in life, whether regarding hoarding or not. But it's an important skill to keep trying to learn, because we can tolerate and live with discomfort. We don't want to re-traumatize ourselves. We don't want to burn out. We don't want to do things that are so hard they're counterproductive. So productive discomfort is usually challenging, but it doesn't wipe you out completely. You can stay present to some degree. There might be waves of it rather than feeling like you're completely drowning. You can often talk yourself through it or get yourself through it. And afterwards, you might feel really proud of yourself. Like, yay, I did that. I got through that. If it's getting to a point where it's more harmful, more negative, more detrimental, that might look like completely burning out, being unable to think at all or speak to other people at all. It might look like dissociating, freezing, feeling self-destructive, or being left unable to do anything for days. If pushing is affecting your functioning, you might be pushing too hard. If pushing is making you unwell, physically or mentally, you might be pushing too hard and need to modify how you're approaching this. Having someone you can check with is so useful. This is something I find really hard. I never know whether I'm pushing too hard or not pushing hard enough. And being able to ask my therapist or a friend whose opinion I really trust and who I trust to tell me the truth and not tell me what I want to hear helps me to settle my anxiety about it to some degree. And we learn as we go. Okay, last week I pushed too hard and then I didn't get out of bed for 3 days. How can I do some this week, but not that? How do I modify what I did so that it is productive discomfort that teaches me I can tolerate it? Maybe that's about putting things in a box to deal with later. It's not always a brilliant approach, but this is all hard. And so sometimes less brilliant approaches are still better than nothing. But somebody, ideally a therapist or somebody who understands working in a trauma-informed way, who maybe understands gradual exposure, who understands the thing that Dr. Jan Eppingstall talks about increasing the time between stimulus and response, just easing in, that can really help to not only prevent burnout, but prevent us from fearing burnout. We can fear it so much that we don't push hard enough, or we can push too hard and burn out. The balance is hard. I'm not going to pretend I have nailed that because I haven't. But I've mentioned having a support person, whether that's a therapist or a peer support group or the De-Hoarding Accountability Zoom or friends or professional organisers or coaches who can help you to stay accountable and also help you to understand some of your reactions to how things are going and help you to regulate if things feel dysregulated. It can be very reassuring. They can be an incredible resource. Those are people who can remind us why we're doing it, why we're trying. They can encourage us if we're doubting we can do it. But they can also say, I think you need a day off, actually, because our own minds are not always the most reliable indicator of all that stuff. And I think the final obstacle I want to talk about is if we do this and we have some success with acting as if in one way or another, and then we slip back, we can then think it's all a waste of time. I've wasted the whole thing. It's all a disaster. And I think giving ourselves permission to start again, to remind ourselves what we're doing and why, giving ourselves permission to occasionally slip, but then to say, okay, that's what happened. Not proud of it, but I'm also not going to sink into a vat of shame about it. This isn't evidence of failure. This is evidence that changing how I do things is really hard. I've been trying to work in a way where I'm doing things one way while my brain hasn't necessarily caught up, and that's hard. So sometimes I will wobble, but slipping up like that is data. It's information. It teaches me things I can learn. And then if necessary, I can act as if I'm the kind of person who picks herself back up and keeps going. I can do one thing and see how that goes and go from there. And when we have some success at acting as if, I've talked about some of the benefits of that already, but I'm going to go into some more now because it's important to see this as a useful, productive idea if we're going to try it. And one of the things it can really help with is that kind of analysis paralysis where we're trying to make a decision and we get stuck in the impossibility of making the right decision, and it's exhausting. And we have to make a zillion decisions, which doesn't help. When we're thinking, do I need this? Do I want this? Do I love it? Do I use it? Where would it go? What would I do with it if I didn't keep it? All of that is overwhelming. And so we go, oh, I'll just keep it. It's too hard. But by acting as if we are a person who doesn't agonize over every old book that we're never going to read, we're kind of making decisions in advance. We've already decided that we're a person who doesn't agonize over this. We've already decided that we need half the books that we currently have. So for every one we keep, one has to go. And some of that cognitive load is reduced, and it's such a relief because we're not having to make every decision as a person who hoards. We're making decisions as if we're somebody it's not such agony for. There might well be less time feeling frozen and staring at piles in panic. And that mental energy that we save, we can use for other things, for fun things, for deciding how we might redecorate if we've successfully cleared the space at some point. None of this is to say it all becomes easy and painless, but when we act as if there's a framework that we're leaning on a bit, and it just makes it more possible. There will still be a pull to keep everything, but we can recognise that and act as if anyway. Another real benefit is that we're more likely, if we are acting as if, we're more likely to experience some of those small wins, those moments where we feel proud of ourselves, or those moments where we can get into a cupboard we've not been able to get into. And those small wins help us to build a momentum that is invaluable in making sure we do a little bit more tomorrow and a little bit more the day after that. We did 10 whole minutes without stopping. We gave 6 bags to the charity shop. We ignored a box on the street that said free to a good home on it. They're wins, and every win builds our confidence a little bit because they compound. Every time we have a win, the next win is that tiny bit easier to achieve, and that momentum and consistency is what we need. Another incredible benefit of acting as if is that often it's a great way to prove that the things we fear will happen if we get rid of things don't actually happen. Often with hoarding disorder, we are afraid of potential future situations. What if I need it? What if I run out? What if? But then if we do start letting things go, or if we do start not acquiring more, and we actually cope fine and we don't run out, or we do run out and realise that's fine, it's evidence that the things we fear might not be as huge as they seem like they are. It's a really effective way of testing some of this out. When we're convinced we'll regret something and we do it anyway, and then maybe we do feel a bit of, oh, I'm not sure, but then that passes and we get on with the rest of our life, it can be almost shocking. Oh, that was surprisingly easy, actually. And that powers us on for the next decision. And I think the final massive benefit, and I have talked a little bit about this at the start, is that when we do things differently, our beliefs and our feelings and our emotions can eventually catch up. It's gradual often, but it can be really profound, even when it's slow. When we manage to be consistent in some acting as if, when we repeatedly over time take actions that do not come naturally to our hoarding brains and challenge our hoarding beliefs, those beliefs do start to shift. We don't have to change our beliefs through willpower or positive thinking or determination, because that's really hard. Instead, the beliefs change because our brains adapt as we get all this new information. Our brains notice new patterns and new benefits. If we act as if it's fine to only ever have 1 bottle of shampoo on the go, and then we live quite happily with only 1 bottle of shampoo on the go, our brain catches up. We start to say, maybe I can trust my decision making. Or maybe I can be resourceful if I need to be. We're not telling ourselves that by looking in the mirror and saying it 10 times. We're telling ourselves that by making decisions that turn out to be correct, or by being without something and working out a really creative and resourceful way through. It's gradual. It can take a while, and we might not even notice it happening until we look backwards. We might not notice it day to day, but then if we succeed in doing this for a while, we can look back and go, wow, I used to really think that, and I haven't thought that for a while. Like when I was a teenager, and I went, oh, I used to have to really get myself into the headspace of I'm going to embody the girl from school in order to get through this. And then at some point in my mid-teens, my brain had caught up and I was doing the thing. The volume of the voice in our head telling us to hoard can get gradually quieter, and the volume of the voice telling us things can be different can get gradually louder. And that happens a lot more through consistent effort than it does through throwing everything at something for a short period of time. So I think that's about as much as my poor voice can manage. But have a think about one way you might be able to try acting as if about something. What feels like it might be worth testing out? What feels like it might be worth attempting? You don't have to believe it. You can try and do it anyway. Okay, thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening to that Hoarder Overcome Compulsive Hoarding podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on board. You can find all the links I've mentioned and a transcript of the episode online at overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk. To find out more about how you can support this podcast and the overall project, go to overcomecompulsivehoarding.co.uk/support and do subscribe to the podcast so you make sure you don't miss any future episodes. There may be links in this podcast that earn me money. This doesn't come at any extra cost to you if you make a purchase through those links, and it helps to support the podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Chirp Your Home, a decluttering and organising course for overwhelmed people. Amy, a declutter coach and professional organiser, has condensed down a range of tools and techniques which she's developed with clients over the past 5 years. Chirp Your Home is a course that uses a mixture of reflective exercises and practical tools with lots of options and opportunities to adapt methods to work for you as an individual. This isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. The course is in audio format with accompanying worksheets, and it's split across 4 modules. If you're worried about finding the time to work through the course, Amy also runs a free body doubling group twice a week that you can use to work through the course in your own time. Visit chirpyourhome.podia.com, that's chirpyourhome.podia.com, and use voucher code OCHPOD for 15% off. It's gradual. It's gradual.